Hello and welcome back to the new view. In the last episode, we talked about gun control, and in this episode, we're actually going to be doing something a little different. Uh, so Today we have Small here. What's up, Small?
Hello, Peach. It is I, Smol.
Yes, the great Small. Yeah. So today we're gonna be doing something different. Today we're gonna be talking about spirituality. Um, yeah. Uh,
The freedom of the mind.
for sure, absolutely. The term spirituality, honestly, is a pretty broad term, and it's actually kind of hard to define. Um, I remember, I remember actually watching this video just when I was like getting into spirituality. Uh, that was basically trying to explain what it was, and it was like fucking 3 hours long. I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch the whole thing. Then I only watched like an hour of it because I was like, holy fuck, this is way too long. And the point's not really getting across. Yeah, spirituality. It's a pretty broad sense. I mean, not sense. It's a pretty broad term overall, and really, it can mean a
Let's
lot of things.
read, let's read the definition really quick, just so we got it. The quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. So, like, being less concerned with what you see in front of you and more so like I would say it's like a feeling, honestly, because a lot of it doesn't really have proof. So it's kind of like a feeling, a belief in something more than what's right in front of us.
I see what you mean. And I half agree with that. I'd say, I'd say it's certainly a feeling that there's much more out there than they're telling us. But at the same time, uh, I wouldn't really say it's a belief. I'd say it's more about knowing, uh, because belief is really with religion, and spirituality is separate from religion. Well, yeah, let's definitely make that clear, because spirituality is definitely different from religion. But some religions can have spiritual aspects to them. Like Sikhism. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's either Sikhism or
It's
Sikhism.
I
Uh,
think it's Sikhism because I think it's the Sikhs.
yeah, Sikhism. Yeah, Sikhism is actually a religion that's fairly spiritual. So I'd say religions can be on a spectrum with spirituality, but overall, religion and spirituality they're really just different. The best way I'd compare the two is I'd say that religion is basically a warping of spirituality in some kind of way.
Right. I think they overlap though, because what you said about beliefs, I don't necessarily agree with because I don't think if you have beliefs in something that automatically makes it religious, because a religion is like a more structured thing that has spirituality in it. Like you can have spirituality without religion, but I can't think of a single religion that doesn't include some sort of spirituality with it, except maybe like Satanism, because they don't actually worship the devil, they just kind of live in the world.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, Satanism. Yeah, Satanism doesn't seem spiritual at all. I mean, I guess the one exception of it would be, um, like the one aspect that you consider spiritual would be, how much magic they practice. Because, like, atheistic or not, like Satanists love to practice magic, which I find kind of odd. I think really the only reason why they practice magic is just to piss off Christians.
I think that's a lot of it. My brother is actually in the Satanic Temple, and
Really?
there are some. Yeah, there are some sects of Satanism that actually do worship the devil,
Holy
and
shit.
I think those are the ones that more perform the magic. But Satanism, as far as like mainstream, they kind of stopped all the black magic, like goat's blood, virgin sacrifices thing, because it was kind of giving them a bad rep, and they're not like all about that. They're just kind of trying to like live their lives, and pretty much from what my brother told me, it's their main thing is don't fuck with me, I won't fuck with you. You do fuck with me, and I'll get my revenge on you.
So it's
And that's
basically
when the
a
black magic comes in, kind of thing.
so it's basically a give none take none mentality, they but they take it to like a religious and black magic extent.
Like I said, not all of them do the black magic extent, and I don't even know if you could call it religious per se, because they don't actually worship the devil, and I think most of them don't even believe in the devil. I think it's almost more of a group, like a group of idealists than a actual like cult thing. I
I don't
think
know.
they do call it a religion, but
I don't know. That kind of sounds like what a cult is to me. I mean, like a
yeah,
bunch of idealistic people just getting together. I mean, and performing like rituals and shit. It sounds like a cult to me. I mean, I'm not here to shit on Satanists. Like, I mean, I admire some aspects of Satanism, and I agree with Satanism to a certain extent, but I'm certainly not a Satanist myself.
me neither. I think they have some valid points. I think you would like, or I'm guessing you might even be talking about these points where Satanism is very much about science and understanding. They don't just kind of throw beliefs around willy nilly. They base their beliefs on like the current science, the current state of the world. They're always trying to evolve themselves so that like they're not seen as some archaic, out of touch, whatever, whatever. But I do feel like I'm kind of talking about Satanism too much. I'm also not the Satanist. I'm just it interests me because I think it's kind of like a no bullshit kind of religion thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one aspect of Satanism I agree with. I do embrace science. I don't worship science. I don't obey science, but I do embrace science as a tool we can use for understanding of the truth. Um, and yeah, that's what I admire about science, and that's what I agree with Satanism on. Um, I mean, we can go on and on about Satanism, but yeah, I think we should probably stick to like just normal spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The other thing I kind of disagreed with is I know we've kind of talked about this before, but you seem really hung up on the phrase of beliefs. How you're very much into knowing things, but I feel like um, kind of taken from Christianity and pretty much all religions, honestly. I feel like a lot of things uh, going with spirituality are very hard, if not impossible, to prove. Like you can have a spiritual experience, but even looking back on one of those experiences, you can kind of doubt yourself. You can kind of feel all these certain ways where you don't really have the proof, even though you full heartedly believe that, like, you know what you saw, kind of thing, but you still don't really have proof. So I think it's still kind of a belief.
well, actually, some of the stuff you can prove. Uh, like for example, um, let's see. I actually read an article fairly recently. Let's see. So at first this was just considered like a spiritual belief. Um, that you can talk to people and connect with people through your dreams. But they actually did a scientific study on this, confirming it. Where they had some people go to sleep and they were lucid dreamers, so they were able to lucid dream. But they were actually able to communicate with the scientists conducting the study through their dream.
Holy shit! And like, was the scientist asleep also, or
No, the scientist wasn't asleep, but it was still a communication through a dream to the real world, or at least what we perceive to be the real world. But yeah,
how how did the scientist like get the communication through? Was he like hearing it in his head? Did he like how did the communication occur if the one guy was sleeping
so as you
and the
know,
scientist was?
right before you um, get into a lucid state, you have this thing called rapid eye movement.
Mm,
So once you're in a lucid dream, you're not only able to control your dream, but you're also able to control your eye movement as well. So a way to communicate from the dream world to the real world is by eye movement. So the scientists told these people to move their eyes from left to right, like if they like I'm not sure 100% like the exact way they communicated. Like if I had to guess, it'd probably be like yes or no questions like
mhm.
can you hear me? And then they move their eyes either to the left or the right, or they do it a certain amount of times. Yeah, it was basically that.
Do you know if when the people that were lucid dreaming woke up, did they remember being asked these questions?
Some of them did, some of them didn't, which was
I think
definitely
that's
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, it is. You should look into it for sure. Um, but yeah, some things that were once considered just spiritual phenomena or belief um are actually being proven today, which is crazy. Um, so I'd say spirituality is the way I put it. It's something that science is catching up with. Um, I'd say spirituality explains a lot of what science can't explain.
Yeah, I believe that there are certain aspects of spirituality that like I have certain beliefs and thoughts on like how the spiritual, let's say, quote unquote world is. There are some things about it that I don't know if science will ever be able to prove. Like certain ideas that I have that I've gotten through like self discovery and whatnot. I guess it could be one of those things where like 100 years before the plane invented, no one would have ever imagined we were inventing planes. So like in 100 years
Yeah,
from now,
exactly.
I don't know what will be. Maybe everything I have theories on will be proven. Maybe they'll be disproven, but maybe we won't get there for millions of years. I don't know.
I'd say we're almost there. Science is advancing rapidly, um, and people are really starting to trust science more. And if people trust science more, then science will get more funding. And if science gets more funding, it gets more advanced. Uh, so I really think science is catching up with spirituality, and it's already starting to confirm a lot of spiritual things. That and also right now we're actually in a renaissance of psychedelics. So we could see um, more scientific studies on psychedelics, as well as legalization as well, um, which as you know, psychedelics they can be. I'd say they're spiritual in nature. I'm not saying just because you do psychedelics you're a spiritual person, or just because you're a spiritual person you do psychedelics, but psychedelics can be a tool for spiritual growth for sure. And I'd say the fact that both science and spirituality um, are fascinated with psychedelics, I'd say this can kind of be a way that the two can sort of unite and sort of be joined together in a way.
Yeah, I didn't know when I was going to bring it up, but I felt like we shouldn't lie to your audience and definitely just come clean that I've done psychedelics, and that's where I've done most of my, let's call it, spiritual exploration, trying to like delve into my own mind, because I feel like that's where you'll find a lot of the spiritual answers. I think that any person has access to it, um, just kind of the sake of being someone with consciousness. Everyone has the ability to kind of look into their own mind and form their own opinions about what they believe in the world. And I think that it's kind of sketchy how you and I agree on so many things, because I was just thinking where people agree on based on like their own experiences. If you have, say, 8,000 people that all did their own self exploration and then they come together and all say the same thing, you'd figure you'd have something there. You know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah,
you have 8,000 different double blind studies and they all happen to have the same result, like that should tell you something.
yeah, it
But
for sure
I don't,
should tell you something. Uh, so
just you and I isn't really enough, but I do think it's interesting that we agree on so many things, even though we haven't necessarily talked about them at length with each other.
oh yeah, it is interesting for sure. And yeah, right now is the perfect opportunity to definitely talk about uh, spirituality a bit more. So I will say something else about psychedelics since um, uh, yeah, we start to talk about them. I'm not legally confessing to any drug use whatsoever of any kind. Um, if I if I say I've done a certain substance throughout this video, I may or may not be lying. Just to make that clear, I'm not legally confessing to anything.
Uh, yeah, me neither. I don't do drugs, kids.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, don't do drugs, guys. We don't promote drug use. Uh, but yeah, just had to make that disclaimer out there. Um, yeah. Anyway,
So, sorry, one more thing about psychedelics before we move on.
yeah, for sure.
I was just talking to my friend about it the other day, and he said in the United States they're doing studies on acid, where for cases of people who have depression, and essentially something that acid does is it makes your brain think in a completely different way. But the way the brain works is that your thoughts only occur really because your neurons form different pathways in your brain. So in order for a thought to take place, it's essentially electricity zapping through your brain based on different routes. So when you're on acid, you can actually form completely new routes that you wouldn't be able to normally. So, like, if you're a depressed person, this isn't me condemning or condoning the use. There's a lot of things to consider when you're going to do any sort of drug. But I will say that it opens up new pathways and new ways of thinking that you may never have seen or even knew were possible being sober. And like your brain, especially on depression, your brain can get so rooted in a state of nothing's changing, everything's impossible, nothing's ever going to get better. And then once you do psychedelics, you'll form those pathways. They might be good, they might be bad. Like I'm saying, if you're depressed, don't just start doing a bunch of drugs. That might not help. But anyway, those neural pathways actually stay for when you're sober again. So you'll form them when you're on the drugs, and then they'll still be there years later where you can still access those kind of same memories, those same thoughts of maybe you had a very positive reaction and you got to think about your situation in a new way. That would stick with you even if you forget a lot of the things. Because honestly, on psychedelics, you don't really remember everything, but you can remember certain things.
Well, yeah, it is true. A lot of studies have been done. Yeah, LSD and other psychedelics, they can. So they do. they basically heal your brain. And they so what they do is this phenomenon called neurogenesis, where actually new brain cells form, and this can give you new ideas, like a new way of thinking, which can which can help you see past depression. You can think, oh wait a minute, there is another way. I can actually create this. That can and I don't have to be depressed all the time. I can take control now. And that's the way psychedelics can be healing. Um, um, but yeah, uh, but yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway,
Uh,
I think we should talk about specifically spirituality a bit more, and not just like uh,
the vagaries behind it. Do you want to get into specifically what each of us believe in? Because
I guess. I mean,
um,
I wouldn't I wouldn't describe them as beliefs, but again, we already went over
okay,
the what do
gotcha.
you call it? What's the term for that? Uh like what's the term? We already went into the technicalities about it, whatever. But yeah, sure, uh let's for
I
sure
would
get on.
say this isn't the term you're looking for, I don't think, but maybe the best way to describe it would be like an educated guess based on what you know, what's been proven, what's being proven. Not necessarily beliefs, but a belief based on an educated guess
That
and what knowledge you do have.
well, again, that's not exactly the term I'm looking for. I guess the term itself would be just overall knowledge. Um, but I guess, um, sure, sure, just for simplicity's sake and to avoid like semantics and getting off track, I guess for simplicity's sake we could say that. But yeah, anyway,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Sorry.
How about so? Yeah, how about yours? Where were you going with that?
Well, I guess to jump into it, I'm really into a sort of duality of spirituality. So what I mean is, I've had these. I don't know if you'd call them visions or feelings or what, but it's a very yin and yang kind of thing where it's essentially feels like there's two people in your same body, kind of like who is it? Leonardo da Vinci's Perfect Man, where the two halves try to come together to make the perfect whole. I think that within every person there is black and white, yin and yang of, I would call them, on the color scale, black is essentially nothing and white is essentially all colors. So that's kind of how I think about it. Or like black is the nothingness in the universe and the white is kind of the everything. But within everything, there is empty space and nothingness. And within nothingness, of course, there exists everything around us. So I think they're very intertwined.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
combined, they kind of make up reality.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. Actually, we really do have two, I guess you could say, people inside of us. Basically two sides of us that make us whole. And yeah, yin and yang are the perfect way to describe them. More like a lighter side and a darker side. Um, um,
And I wouldn't really say the darker side is evil. I would
yeah,
say that
it's
both
not evil.
sides.
It's not evil for sure. At least not necessarily for everyone. Um, I'd say it's definitely a different perspective within yourself, a different way of looking at things. Because you can look at things in different ways at the same time, while at the same time completing your whole view of everything. And I do like the way you put it. the nothingness and everythingness analogy, uh, because that is true. That is what the universe is made of. Um, the universe literally is everything, but at the same time, it contains a whole bunch of nothing because
Mm.
you have the space in between everything, which some people would describe as dark matter, but at the same time, what if that's what dark matter is? A bunch of nothing.
Yeah, we could be talking about the same thing. I want to also make another sort of analogy for the black and the white. I think it has a very life and death theme to it, and if I had to guess, I would say that the white and the everything kind of matches more with the life side, like breathing life into things, and the blackness and the nothingness has more to do with death, how you kind of decompose into nothingness. And I think that's why sometimes you can kind of think that the black is evil, but really, if we didn't have death, then I think the world would be a terrible place. Yeah, I actually do believe in God. I don't think, I mean, I'm
Really?
sure there are other people that agree with me.
You
Not
believe in
necessarily that.
wait? You believe in God? Really?
I don't believe in a specific religious God, but I think that all religions are kind of like people get these feelings and then they try to interpret them and write them down. And I think essentially all people are getting the same message, but they're interpreting it differently. So that's why we have all these different religions. They're
Yeah.
all trying their best, or at least they were in the start. Religions have become corrupt over time, but I truly believe that they're trying their best to understand the world, understand spirituality, and they're trying to put it into writing. They're trying to spread their messages. So I really think every single religion out there is really just describing the same thing, but they're describing it in different ways based on culture, based on region, based on understanding, based on just kind of how they see the world. So how they're more inclined to interpret something that's put in front of them.
Yeah, for sure. I can kind of agree with that. Yeah, religion is definitely. I'd say religion is a take on spirituality. Um, but yeah, they're really trying to describe the same thing. That's for sure. It is for sure different interpretations. Um, and yeah, spirituality. I mean, religion. Is basically using this in a way to control people and make them think a certain way because they're thinking, oh, wow, yeah, this is the absolute truth. Everyone needs to know about this. And so it gets to the point where if someone doesn't believe in that, then they feel like they have to use force to convert them that way. Um, so, so they do think like them, which is, where religion becomes corrupt and evil. Um, but But yeah, they are. They do. They all have the same goal. They're trying to understand um, just the spiritual nature of the universe and just everyone and all that. So, but yeah. So earlier you were saying you believe in God. So is it one God or is it a bunch of gods?
So, if you were to go based on like Hinduism or Greek mythology or whatnot, they would be a bunch of gods. If you were to go based on like Christianity, Muslim, Judaism, they all would call it one god. If I had to guess, I would say it's one, but I think it can take on so many forms that essentially an infinite number of forms that you could also interpret it as being many. Essentially, what I believe is that God existed and God got lonely and bored. And he pretty much, or he, she, it, I think it's both. I think it's neither all at the same time.
Oh wow!
Kind of just existed and was very bored and lonely. So they split themselves up into two. At that time, the Big Bang occurred, and kind of just spread God's jizz everywhere. And then
that
over
sounds
time, we've kind of
that sounds
become
really
what we've become.
sexy. That's very sexy. We're all just gods come. It's amazing.
Yeah, so he got like incredibly lonely because even an infinitely small amount of time, because nothing existed, an infinitely small amount of time would seem like an eternity. So imagine a dude sitting in a blank white room just for eternity, and he wanted to experience something. So he created his two halves that could interact with each other and pretty much be all each other needs. And then we're born. And I think doubt is important because I think we've come so far down the line that we don't know things for sure. We only have beliefs. That's my opinion, at least. And so, like, when we interact with each other, we do it on a very, I wouldn't say materialistic way, but like when you approach somebody, you see them, they're there. You don't really question it. I mean, you might through existential yada yada, do we exist? Do I exist? Yada yada. But when you go up to somebody, you can touch them, you can talk to them, and it's really another person right there. And I
Yeah,
think that it's kind of like I have the same two halves of God in me, and you have the same two halves of God in you. And we're kind of experiencing ourselves through each other. And I think that's what God wanted all along because he was just
hmm.
bored and lonely.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So you're basically saying that um that God wanted to feel something, so we just or she, whatever, just split up, and then that created everything. So
Hmm.
you're saying everyone is God.
Yes, and I wouldn't so far as say that. I would say that we all have God in us, and I think yes, we are all God. But I think you only really experience it if you can kind of combine those two halves, and it's a very specific feeling. I describe it. It kind of feels like there's a line going straight down your vision, and it's almost as if like two halves of your being are colliding into each other right in front of you and all throughout you, and they're like vibrating together and intersecting across each other. And it's just a very, it's almost like you are giving them the, I don't want to say respect, the recognition. You recognize that they exist and they appreciate that. And that lets them come together and kind of show you what pretty much the whole point of everything is.
I
The
see what you
whole,
mean. Uh, so yeah, I would say everyone has a light and a dark side. I certainly have one, and they've certainly been conflicted a lot recently. For me recently though, I have noticed they've been more coming together. And I've noticed the more they come together, the more whole you feel, and just overall, the more just the more power you receive because you, I mean, you can feel your um, separate selves coming together and realizing your true power. Um, though I would say, me personally, I do consider myself atheist. I consider myself spiritual, like spiritual, but atheist at the same time. I I would say no gods exist, honestly. Um, and I will say the reason why. So I will say I do like your interpretation of what exactly God is. I do think that's fascinating, and I agree with that to an extent. But I wouldn't exactly use the word God. I'd say we're all infinitely powerful beings, uh, with infinite potential. Uh, but I wouldn't say that necessarily makes us gods. Uh, Again, depending on how you define what a god is, which is what I've been looking into recently, actually. Um, but um, I would say that there's no such thing as God, because having gods would imply that there are certain beings that are above other certain beings, um, and that would overall create a superiority and inferiority just aspect uh, where certain beings would have to worship these other beings that are considered higher, um, which is really what I disagree with in the whole God aspect. Um, I'd say I'd say we don't need to worship anyone, and that there aren't beings more powerful than us. I'd say we're all equally powerful and equally we all have equal potential, and that we're all co-creators of our realities and universe. Um, so I'd say God can exist. Like there's no way a God can exist, uh, because we're not above or below anyone. And I'd say that applies to every single being in the entire universe. And I would say I'm kind of more open to the possibility of maybe gods existing. Um, but overall, this is yeah, that's basically how I put it. Um,
Well, I would say at least the quote unquote God I believe in isn't really looking to be worshipped so much as recognize that it exists, which I think is where belief and faith comes in. I think you get that feeling where you truly believe something with your entire being, and it gives you like it puts you in a state of like elation, and I think that's kind of the feeling that you're looking for. And as far as like a hierarchy of higher and lower, I agree with you. I don't think there's any sort of higher or lower because even if you call it God, I think it's still a part of you.
can you really call them
And
gods then?
well, I do think it's a separate thing though. I think it is me, but I think it's important to differentiate that I am not all powerful. I can't create a hurricane at will. I can't blow fire out of my hands. I can't manipulate the universe at my whim.
Well,
Um,
at least not now. But you know, we're beings that are growing. Uh, so you may be able to do that in the future once you uh, just overall become more intact. I don't know if intact is the best word for that. Just more in tune, just with your spirituality and your full potential. You soon to discover that really you can do anything.
I'd kind of like to make a point on that and continue with the hierarchy thing. Uh, I think that I think that different dimensions play a big role in it. I think in like the higher order of dimensions is really where quote unquote God exists. The way I see it is like a giant spider web where every single person is connected. And I think that in higher dimensions, those connections can all come together at a single point. And at that single point, it's essentially experiencing all experiences that have ever, will ever, and are currently being experienced. And I think that singular point is God. And I think that that point exists in everyone because, like the spider web, it when you go into the higher dimensions, I'm not fully aware on how different dimensions work, but the
I
way
am
I
a little
imagine
bit.
it, is that it kind of all comes together into a one singular entity thing. And I think that's what God is. And I think it exists throughout all things in everybody at the same time. So I don't even think you could worship it because if you did, you would essentially be worshiping yourself, which would just be kind of like
Narcissistic.
nihilism, narcissistic.
Wow,
Which so
that's pretty fascinating actually. I never thought of it all as a spider web. Um, that's a really great analogy to put it. Um, I'd say I'm becoming more open to the possibility that God does exist. So I don't know. I don't like to call myself agnostic, but I'd say I'm definitely open to the idea. Um, but but yeah, that's very interesting. And I noticed you mentioned dimensions. So I actually do have. I've been looking into dimensions a bit lately. I do have a bit of a concept and knowledge of dimensions. Uh, so let's see, what would be a good way to put it? Uh, let's see. Oh man, I don't even know where to start with dimensions. I guess um, I'll use this sort of analogy. Um, so, so as you know, the first dimension is a line. Um, so have you, so have you ever watched a cartoon where one of the characters within that cartoon was drawing a line,
sure.
like just in the sand or the dirt or something?
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, so that would be, and so as you know, cartoons are two dimensional. Uh, it's a two. You have a two-dimensional creature of some kind, an animal or human or whatever. That's two-dimensional, creating a one-dimensional line. But think about this. Uh, Something had to create that cartoon. And as you know, the thing that created that cartoon was a three-dimensional being. So the third dimension is what created the second dimension, and what created the second dimension created the first dimension. But if you think, if you, but think about this. Um, think about what created the third dimension. Uh, so it's, and this is where it gets a bit hard to explain, but I'll do my best. Um, so basically, yeah, the third dimension you have length, width, and depth.
Hmm.
And as you know, the fourth dimension is time. Uh, as you know,
I I've heard that. I don't fully understand it, but I'm aware of that. Yeah.
well, I can explain it to you a bit more. So, as you know, um, when you're in the third dimension, uh, you can go in basically three directions. I mean, overall, you have all directions, but um, basically, as you know, width, length, and depth.
Hmm.
So that's all you can go. You cannot. It's not possible to go outside of this at all when you're in the third dimension. Uh, but there is another there is another direction you can go once you get into the fourth dimension, which is time. Uh, so as you know, time. Uh, so uh, sorry, I just had a bit of brain fart. But time. So as you know, time goes forward. Um, and that's where that's another direction you can go because as you know, time is always moving. Uh, if you're going into the future, for example, that's technically another direction. Um, as you know, you have a lot of people saying, "Oh, we need to move forward," and they're referring to progress, and they're specifically referring to time. We need to
Hmm.
move forward within our time. uh, just to reach a better time overall. Which that'd be a direction because as you know, if you move forward, um, then you then that's where you can go from there. That's where things start to get different. Which brings you actually to the fifth dimension, which the fifth dimension is about creating your own reality. And you do this by using time. As you know, you need to use you need to use two things to create your own reality. You need to use um, basically, I guess, uh, you need to use your imagination, which, as you know, are your thoughts. You need to use your thoughts and combine them with time, uh, because you can't just create something instantly. Uh, but what you can do is use time. Just have time on your side, and then use your use your thoughts, and then just make them into reality. Because as you know, thoughts create actions, and your actions create um,
Reality.
your actions create reality. So if you combine this with the time and dedication, then that's how you create a new reality, and that's how you get into the fifth dimension by using the fourth dimension, time, to create your new reality. You can't once again you can't go anywhere else, length, width, and depth if you're just in the third dimension. That's why, and again, this takes time for a lot of people to realize, but you can use time to your advantage to create new things, to create new to create new realities. And that's when you realize you're in the fifth dimension. That's how you get to the fifth dimension.
I want to disagree with you a little bit there.
All
I
right,
think
that
that
that's all right. We can agree and disagree as much as we want. Go for it.
uh, so about the fifth dimension and however many higher dimensions, I believe that you don't necessarily have to do anything to get there. I think you already exist there. I think maybe to use it as your advantage, you might have to think a certain way or do a certain thing, but sort of like how a two-dimensional drawing on a piece of paper can exist in the third dimension if I were to hold up that piece of paper. I think that we exist and travel through the fourth dimension, and I think we exist
Oh, we
and
do.
move throughout all dimensions, but without even having to think about it. I
Well,
just think we can't necessarily perceive that we're in those dimensions.
I actually agree with you, kind of in a way. Um, we do exist within all these dimensions, but at the same time, dimensions are kind of a state of mind as well. Um, you are able to travel through all of them, uh, which is overall a pretty trippy concept. But it is possible. Um, but yeah, it definitely takes a certain state of mind to get to these different dimensions. You do exist with all of them simultaneously, but you need to discover how, um, which can be sort of a goal with spirituality. Um, so I'd say I've already made it to the fifth dimension, um, which again, like you mentioned earlier, we're in all dimensions at the same time. We just haven't realized it yet. Which is where the
And
process of waking up comes in. You need to wake
you
up
feel like
and discover that you're traveling within dimensions. You're an you're an interdimensional being, uh, in the literal sense. You're We're all interdimensional beings that need to discover that we're within all dimensions.
yeah,
But yeah, I'd
and you
say I'd
think
say it's definitely more of a process and a growth. Um, So it is possible to travel from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, which I have done personally, and it's been a very intense and enlightening process. Um, and anyone can go through this process. And it is possible to keep going. Really, the growing and the learning never stops. Really, um, it's really an infinite process. Um, just to reach, I guess you could say the ultimate dimension, or the way you word it, God. Um, but yeah, um, yeah, I'd say I'm currently in the fifth dimension, and a lot of people are still in the third dimension. I'd say you seem to be in the fifth dimension as well, but I'm not sure. You may still be in the third dimension. How about
Um,
you? What dimension would you say you're in?
I would say I don't really know enough about them, especially when I'm, let's say, in a psychedelic trip or whatever. I would definitely say I've experienced things that feel out of the third dimension. I don't know if it's fourth, fifth, or whatever, but
You you may have temporarily traveled to the fifth dimension. It is possible.
I'll say that. Oh yeah, kind of going on your point of always growing, always learning. It feels like you can kind of get to a point where you think you figured it all out, and it might kind of hinder your growth. And I've been like that for a while.
Well, yeah.
But then, like just last night, I kind of had an epiphany that was very comforting,
Oh,
where it's
really?
kind of like, yeah, back to the duality thing. Um, I think they are meant to be. I don't know. It's kind of a weird meditation thing where it feels like I can feel them, and you can kind of twist it, like literally. Imagine like two strings shooting up through your body, through your throat, through your brain, up into infinity, straight up in the air.
Yeah.
Two strings that are pulled taut and like a railroad track. I think that's how they're supposed to be, and I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but
No, that makes sense.
for the longest time, uh, you can kind of twist those lines, and it doesn't feel great. And for whatever reason, it seems like it's more meant that they're separate. Maybe not necessarily separate, but not in conflict with each other, twisting themselves into knots. And kind of going back to the fourth dimension thing, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I remember I wrote something a while ago, like a poem, and it essentially feels like imagine everyone's souls is at like a bus station, and there's a bus that's just infinitely long, an infinite amount of doors just soaring through the station at all times. And you can hop on, you can hop off. And I think when you hop on, that's really when you experience these other, I guess I would call them dimensions. It's like a meditative state where you can really feel something outside of yourself that is still clearly inside of yourself because you can experience it simply through thought. And I think that anyone can at any time. All you got to do is kind of jump all aboard. And I think a very important part of that is that we're all jumping aboard the same thing. And there is no real other thing because going back again to the different religions, I think there's a big problem when you start calling other people wrong and, like you said, killing people for those reasons. I think it's kind of
Yeah,
admirable almost that you would feel so passionately about your beliefs that you'd be willing to kill because you truly believe that you're right. But I think that's just a misunderstanding. And I think that really you're both right. And I think that
I think it's a.
you're just getting parts of it.
I'd say
And if
it's
you
a
combine those
pretty.
parts, you'll realize that it's all the same because when you pray, someone might be hearing it, call it God, call it what, but if you pray and you truly believe that someone's hearing your prayer, I think that somebody is. And I think that if you have millions of different people that are in hundreds of different religions all praying, but they're praying to different gods, I think that it's all the same God hearing all the prayers. And I think you're really just kind of praying to your inner self, trying to sort of manifest a reality with your thoughts.
Hmm. Yeah, that kind of does make sense. Yeah, for sure. Hmm. Yeah, I really do think that's what people are hearing in their heads when they are praying. They're really just hearing their inner self, just creating the answers for them. And once they have those answers, they manifest them, and that can be perceived as all the quote unquote miracles that um, God has blessed them with. It's really not God doing anything for them. It's really themselves. It's the people themselves creating their own miracles. Um,
I think you're kind of discounting it just a little bit because I think there is a true feeling where if you pray and you're looking for answers, it can feel like an answer comes from outside of you.
it
But
can.
I think really what that is, it's not necessarily that like God is blessing you with the wisdom. It's just kind of like uh let's call it your third eye or your inner self or whatever you want to call it. It feels like there's something else that puts the answer in your head that doesn't feel like yourself, but I think in some sort of way that I've talked about already that it really is yourself. But I think calling it yourself, and I think saying that it's really just you that's answering your own questions, I think that's kind of discounting it a little bit because if you pray and it feels like you hear something or it feels like there really is something else out there that's communicating with you. I think for you to just say that, oh, that was just my head answering itself, I think that kind of devalues the importance and the kind of power, I guess, of prayer and self meditation and just
Well,
your thoughts.
I wouldn't say it devalues it at all because I mean, uh, at the same time, you could interpret it this way that the power was within you all along,
Hmm.
and that you're just becoming in touch with that power. And I mean, you could be so it is a bit tough to sort of figure out if it's more internal or external, but at the same time, the two can kind of like the line between the two can kind of blur because you could get to a point where you realize where really the greatest illusion is the division between everything. Like
Hmm.
the best way to word it, I'd say, would be um, that you can come to a point where you realize that you are everything, that you are the universe, and that the universe is you. Um, so in that sense, it can be external, um, because you'd be gaining knowledge from the universe, but at the same time, that universe would be you. So at the same time, you are gaining this knowledge from yourself. I'd say you can
Yeah,
sort of say it's both at the same time. Um,
I I completely agree. Yeah.
okay, that That's great. Yeah, for
It
sure.
it just kind of felt like the way you said it. Um, I don't know. As long as you see it as like a, I don't know if I want to say the word grandiose because it's a little preachy, but I don't think you should devalue people's personal experiences.
No, I'm not
I
at
I
all.
think that
Absolutely not. That's the opposite of what I'm doing actually. I'm just trying um to maybe just interpret it in a certain light where maybe they can look at it that way. I'm not saying I'm not saying that these people are just full of themselves and that it's all in their head and shit like that. Um, I'm just trying to say that it is possible that they could be unlocking a certain power within themselves. Um, but at the same time, that power could also come externally as well. But at but yeah, at the same time, I would say it's kind of both at the same time, which it's really trippy to grasp. But yeah, um,
it's really the same.
yeah,
I think
but yeah,
because well, the way I look at it is to get kind of sciency. Uh, Electrons, they exist in like a cloud and they're always moving, but you actually don't know where they are until you measure it. So they don't really exist until you look at them. They exist in kind of a foggy, cloudy state until you actually like pinpoint where it is.
yeah,
And
that is true. That kind
it,
of goes with quantum mechanics, like the double slit experiment. Um, do you know what the double slit experiment is?
is that the one where they shine the light through the slits and they expect it to kind of just go on the wall in a very uniform pattern, but it kind of sprays everywhere?
Yeah. It kind of just sprays everywhere, but it all depends on if you're observing it or not. Um, yeah, it's really weird. Um, like let's see. Yeah,
The reason I
they form a different way depending on if you're observing it or not, which is it's really weird to grasp.
the reason I said that is because you were talking about the blurred line things, where it's like we're all kind of little clouds floating around, and what's to say where my hand ends, my cloud doesn't actually continue on to infinity. Like I can't really, even as I'm saying it, I can't really feel it. But like, you know what I mean? Like, what's to say I'm any different than what is 2 inches in front of me in the air? Just
Exactly. Um, yeah, really, I'd say separation is an illusion. Um, really, we are all one, just with the universe and with all conceivable realities and with all conceivable other universes as well. Um, and all conceivable other realities as well, etc., etc. Um, we really are everything at the same time. Um, really, I'd say we're just pinpoints of the universe observing itself.
mhm.
I guess the best way, I guess a good analogy would be to say is that we're all sort of eyes. We're all eyes of the universe, which is possibly where the term the third eye comes from, because we have awakened this sort of eye within ourselves, which could be, you know, the eye of the universe manifesting itself, um, and just sort of observing itself, really.
Yeah. And everyone shares that third eye. That's kind of all.
Yeah,
It's
everyone
all.
does share that third eye. We just need to come in touch with that state. Which, by the way, I noticed you brought earlier, um, sort of prayer and meditation. So I'd say prayer is in a way meditative in itself because
Mhm.
you're trying to find peace and focus within yourself. Um, you're trying to you're trying to focus on a certain thing. Like if you're religious and you're praying to a certain god, you're trying to focus on this god. So it it brings you to a meditative state. Um, where yeah, you're focused on this thing, and this thing is God. And through that, you could unlock something within you, or as you brought up with um outside of you. Um,
which is still within
yeah, exactly. um, but yeah, so in a way, you can say that prayer is a style of meditation. Um,
you. Yeah,
but yeah, I'd say yeah, meditation, just overall in general, meditation is a great way to grow spiritually. Um, because it helps you sort of connect with the present, and it helps you connect with the universe. Um, uh, it it makes you feel just in touch with everything at once. Once you realize that you are within the present, uh, you realize that you're also within the universe and that you are the universe. Um, you you overall just realize that you are everything. Um, like it's a trippy concept, but yeah, definitely deep meditation can help you achieve this.
I think that's a very important point of being in the present. I think that's kind of what it's all about. I think you have to be a little bit wary of meditation because if you use it incorrectly or someone else uses it incorrectly on you, like a lot of cults use meditation because it's a very calming thing and it makes you more susceptible to suggestion. And that can be good if you're meditating for yourself because then you can be more susceptible to kind of out of the box thoughts that are you're allowing to enter into your own head presently. But if you were to say meditate within the Charles Manson club, and then after you finish your meditation, he starts filling your head with all these thoughts, you're going to be more susceptible to those thoughts because you just kind of opened and cleared your mind through meditation and yoga. They actually use meditation and yoga in a lot of these cults because it makes your mind more malleable and more open, and therefore you can be more easily manipulated. And I think it's okay to manipulate yourself as long as you try to keep your biases out of it and you try to just like really live in the moment and just kind of try to honestly feel and think how you're honestly feeling and thinking. Um, but yeah, just be careful with meditation. And I think that kind of goes for psychedelic drugs as well, more with the honesty and whatnot, because a lot of bad things can happen if you're, let's say, high and you try to lie to yourself, or you're meditating and you try to lie to yourself. It'll be much more exasperated on the drugs because you're in a trip that you can't leave and it can go really poorly. Whereas meditation, you can kind of just quit whenever you want, but it's this feeling that like you're lying to yourself and your deepest self knows what you're thinking before you even think it because it's like that gut feeling.
Yeah, that's true.
So you know when you're lying to yourself. You can't trick yourself.
Yeah,
You
for
can
sure.
kind of hype yourself up in the morning, be like, I'm handsome, I'm sexy, and it might kind of be lies, but if you tell yourself that enough, you can start believing it and it can become a reality, which I think that's harmless because I think
Yeah, that is
everyone
harmless.
is. I think everyone's beautiful, and I think
That is true.
everyone should be able to tell themselves that they're beautiful. And I don't think you're lying to yourself when you do that.
That is true. Everyone
Um,
is beautiful in their own way.
but I think you really got to be careful for what you allow to go into your brain when you're trying to seek the truth,
Yeah, yeah,
because
for
you can
sure,
lie to yourself, but it's not going to work out. If you try to lie to yourself,
for sure.
and
This
it,
is
it gets
why,
worse.
yeah, this is why I think it's best to just seek the complete, unbiased truth. And this is also where I become skeptical of both cults and religion. Which, by the way, I'd say religions are really just glorified cults. Um, but yeah,
They're,
they
they're
manipulate
successful and long lasting.
what?
They're successful and long lasting cults. And cult is kind of a bad name for it. I don't have a whole lot of problem with a lot of religions. I think they bring people together, but I think essentially they are cults because,
They
let's
are.
say,
So let me just
if
ask you, what? So why are religions good and cults bad? Um, at least according to you, because that's basically how they're interpreted overall. Like when you hear the term religion, you're like, oh yeah, this thing. Oh yeah, I gotta respect this guy's religious beliefs. That they're absolutely sacred. But when you hear someone say cult, you go like, oh yeah, that's bad. This guy is mind controlling people. Oh, this thing is evil. You can't just make people think a certain way. When really they're really the same thing. So why? So let me ask you, why would you say one is good and one is bad?
I think it has to do with intention. I'll definitely say that if you go into a religion, it can almost be different based on a church by church basis. Like you could go to one church and they could be very open, they can be very loving, they can be very accepting. It can be like a great community bringing people together to kind of form a family. And then you can go to another church and it can be very money grubby, it can be very my way or the highway. I think it's a very case by case basis. I would say they're the same, but like I said, I think it's all about intention. A lot of cults is usually like a essentially a psychotic man who's usually very charming and convincing and charismatic is the word I was looking for. Can really just get a lot of people on their side, and those usually aren't for the right reasons. Like Charles Manson did it because he wanted to start a race war and he wanted to kill celebrities and he just wanted to feel powerful. And I think, let's say, the Catholic Church, for instance, especially way back when, they had a whole lot of power. And I think a lot of their motives were based on getting more of that power. And I think that nowadays a lot of big religions are kind of the same thing where they get tax write offs. They have a lot of influence, whether through voting or money. I think
Yeah, for sure.
even if I were to start, let's say, a religion, I would probably call it a cult. Um,
Really? You just say, oh hey, this is a cult.
well, I wouldn't try to say that because I'm not saying I would do that, but even if I had the best intentions, when I die, whoever is my predecessor could completely change the rules and turn into something with ill intentions.
Hmm.
Or maybe I get corrupt with power and then I start having ill intentions. Um, I think it really, good or bad, is just based on what you're setting out to do. Like, I've met Catholic priests who, I'm thinking of one in particular who was like literally the nicest guy I've ever met and like would do no harm to anybody. And I think he truly believed in the Catholic God, the Christian God. And I think that what he was doing was good because he was showing people that there's good in the world and he was showing people that I'll turn the other cheek and he was showing people that love thy neighbor as thy love as you love thyself. He
What?
was really
Well, I can agree. That's
open to
nice.
loving everybody,
Well, that's
and
good.
I think also, like I said about intentions and stuff, and about how religions, I believe, started with good intentions. I think whoever had that golden rule line of treat thy neighbor as you treat thyself, I think that's one hell of a line because I think someone was way ahead of their time. Because if you think about it, that's essentially saying what we've been saying all night of treat thy neighbor as it is thyself. Like you are one and the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's a
I mean, that is
it's
true. You do bring up a good point. That line really is ahead of its time because it's trying to make people think and just overall realize, hey, uh, what if your neighbor really is yourself? Wouldn't you want to treat yourself great? So if you treat your neighbor safe, you'd all, I mean, great. You'd also be treating yourself uh, great because all you are all the same, really.
and also how uh, God exists in the temple of your mind. It's crazy to think that people way back when who came up with these lines could have been thinking what we're thinking, and if they weren't, it could have been like the stepping stones towards a future. It's just crazy to think that people way back when had these crazy thoughts and they've withstood the test of time and really like I just think that line is insane. The treat thy neighbor as you treat thyself.
Yeah,
Actually, I want to know that line 100%. I think that is it, but I'm paraphrasing it, I believe.
yeah. It's so basically there are many ways you can say it, and the golden rule is really there are many ways it can be said, and many different words that can replace it, but they all have the same message. Um, and but yeah, you bring up how it's just mind blowing how people could think this even way back then, but it really makes you think. Um, what if uh, what if people back then actually weren't so primitive? What if just all their records were destroyed? Um, and what if actually were some were actually advanced in a way, um, but just all these records have been just completely destroyed, and they kind of had a lot of things figured out. I mean, obviously not everything figured out because that's not because really no one has everything figured out. But yeah, um, what if that was the case? Um, where there were like civilizations and people that were more advanced that than we think they were today.
I think it's possible. I think I haven't looked into it a whole lot, but I think Taoism had a lot of really good points. And I think it kind of was back then how it is now, with like, you've got the people that are the seekers trying to find the knowledge, and then you've got the people that are already corrupt because like being corrupt and being powerful has its perks. Let's not kid ourselves.
It
So
really
there's
does.
like there's a lot of ways you can live in the world, and it's hard to think that like if I had $40 billion and like a Fortune 500 company, to not let that get to my head. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
could snap my finger and I could like bankrupt uh, Florida or whatever, or I could like get my
exactly.
private jet to fly me wherever I wanted. Like that's
It
a
is
lot of
true.
power.
It
And
it is a lot of power. Which is why I'd say there's really two types of power. There's the power within yourself. Um, and then there's the fake worldly power, um, which could be, as you know, money, um, fame, glory, and just political power as well. Um, yeah, if you try to mess with these kinds of power, um, and if you crave this power, then really it's going to get to your head and corrupt you, to the point where you care more about having having this absolute power and this just absolute control over the world, or at least the world around you, um, that that you become corrupt, to the point where really it consumes you and overall just turns you into a monster.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with fear.
For sure, fear really plays into this. Fear can really control people. It can make people submissive. And it can definitely give power to a lot of people who are injecting this fear into you.
Well, I think also even the people with power have fear because they're always afraid of the next coup, the next French Revolution. So
Oh
they
yeah, for
feel like
sure.
they
They're
have this power, and the only way they can keep it is for them to keep getting more power.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, really, they are fearful because, well, they work with fear. They use fear as a weapon. Um, and it only makes sense that if they have so much fear that they're injecting into everyone, that at the same time they're injecting fear into themselves, because it's going to catch up with them. Because, like you brought up just barely, um, they realize that it is possible for them to be stopped completely. Revolution is always around the corner. Um, there's it's always possible for these institutions and powerful people to fall at an instant, and they realize this, so they constantly feel fear. They're always watching their backs. Um,
Mhm.
they're they just always they just always have this fear around them, and it's never going to go away. It just always consumes them. They're consumed by power, and then once they have this power, they're consumed by fear, because they're fearful of letting go of their power.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think you called that power fake before, and I think that's not necessarily fair. I think it has to do with kind of the definition of spirituality again. There's the material and there's the spiritual, and I think for you to call the material fake, um, I don't think that's really fair because like hunger is real, thirst is real.
Well, yeah, that is
Um,
true. Well, I mean, fake. It was basically just a word to describe it. I know it's obviously real. Um, I think I was just trying to use a word to describe. What I mean by that is it's definitely more material. It's about possession of things.
mhm.
Uh, that's really what I meant by uh, this power being fake. By fake, I mean, yeah, just again, material possession of things, and just overall trying to have it all.
Which time and time again has proven to be unfulfilling, at least from the accounts of people that have achieved these levels of success.
Oh, for sure,
Um,
it is. A lot of these people feel empty inside. Um, like they feel like they have it all, but at the same time they just want more, and it can never be fulfilled. There's always something else they want. Um, even if it's just not to be lonely, it just never gets fulfilled.
which I think that I'm pretty sure you're not. Yeah, I know you're not really for marriage, but I think that marriage is a beautiful thing.
And
If
I
you want to
don't.
give it, if you want to give it a name or not, at least the coming together of two people, I think, is a beautiful thing.
Oh, I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with two people coming together romantically. I just don't think there should be marriage. Um,
Yeah,
because
you don't want the government and the church having their input in the process.
yeah, really, it's so marriage. Really, marriage is basically three things intervening. It's the government, the corporations, and religion all having a say. They're they're basically saying that they have to approve of you two coming together. When really, I don't think that should be the case. I think people should be able to come together without some sort of official government or corporate or religious ceremony. I think two people should just be able to come together and say, "Oh, hey, we're together." I mean, like, I'm not like I don't have a problem with it being an event. Like, I mean, in the future, I do want like when I'm coming together with someone, I want to have like a party. Like I don't want to have a wedding. Like I want it to just be a party saying, "Oh hey, we're celebrating our love. Uh
Mhm.
come join us and have some fun." I don't want it to be some sort of thing where it's like oh hey, this this government uh and this corporation and this religion has to recognize that we're together. So it's absolutely official. I just reject that overall.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they have their hand too far into that pocket.
For
I
sure,
do
they do.
think I do think there's something beautiful about wearing a ring, though. If I ever end up with somebody, I'll definitely want to wear a wedding ring. I think it's
I probably would not. Because, so, oh man. So I'm going to bring up something kind of interesting. So, the film The Ring?
yes.
So, as you know, so really what that film was trying to say is that certain items can give you a corrupt sense of power. And I'd say a ring is a perfect representation of this. Um, I wouldn't say you should have to like wear like a ring uh, just to be fulfilled, because that can kind of get to your head. Like as you know with Gollum, like like Gollum, like as you know the scene in the first one. I mean, no, not the first one, the third one, uh, where you've seen all the three films, by the way, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
I know
good.
what part you're
Okay, good.
talking about.
I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah. So yeah, that scene at the beginning where Gollum discovers this ring, and then his friend is just wearing it, but he's like, "Oh, it's mine. I need to have this ring." And then it just escalates and escalates to the point of him literally killing his friend just because he wants this ring. Um, and so he essentially became what he thought was fulfilled because he had this new power of becoming invisible. But at the same time, it went to his head, and he slowly became mad with power. I'd say that can happen with other things like for example a Super Bowl ring or um, or a wedding ring because people I've noticed people when they get married like they say they never want to take it off, and that always freaked me out as a kid. I was like, wait, you never take this off, never, and like I just always felt that it was just crazy how people felt like they had to have this ring on and like it means something.
Well, I think the reason for that is because the ring. I think it can get to your head, but I think the ring, what it represents, is the important part of two people coming together, and you can kind of look at your hand and you can think about the other person. And I think one great thing about a ring that is also kind of a problem is that you wear it out in public, and if someone's like flirting with you and you just want to like not deal with it, you just kind of like show your left hand or whatever, show that you're wearing a wedding ring all casually. And I think that can be seen as bragging, which I think is bad, but I think it
Yeah,
can also be seen as being faithful, which I think is good. Saying to someone like, "No, I'm married," just without even having to say it.
I
Kind of
don't
like
know. To
I'm
me, it kind of does seem like bragging. Like, oh, please get away from me. Stop flirting with me now. I'm with someone. I have the power to shove you away by showing this ring. I do think in that way it can really get to your head. Um, which yeah is one reason why I oppose rings. Um, I mean, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think the act of wearing rings is inherently wrong. I just don't. I just really don't think it should uh, go to your head. And I really do think it's way over the top to wear a ring constantly. Like I just think that's crazy overall.
I kind of think it's beautiful. I think it's kind of like the reason I went on to this whole wedding tangent is and marriage tangent is because talking about the how you are two halves and that other person's two halves, and by being together you're kind of like experiencing yourself. And if you're with a person who you can be your true self with and you can be honest with, I think it's a very beautiful thing. And I think that sure you don't have to wear your wedding ring all the time, but I think it's like almost symbolism that we are forever connected. Um,
Well, let me ask you this:
like
what if you chose to never wear a ring? What if you just said to your partner, "Oh hey, yeah, I'll be completely faithful to you." Well, not faithful. I don't want to use the word faithful, but I'll be completely loyal to you, and I promise I love you, and I'm not gonna do this with anyone else. Um, but what if you can just say that and just be completely honest about it, but not wear a ring? Would you say that's a bad thing? Just not wearing a ring?
no, I think that's fine. I think a lot of the world is moving to that already. I know we've
Okay.
already kind of moved away from gold rings into different kinds of rings for getting married. And I think it's all fine. I think that I just kind of like little mementos and things that help me remember certain days, certain people. Like I have a few knickknacks just laying around my room that essentially their only purpose is the sentimental value and kind of like reminding me, oh yeah, that was a cool day. Or I look at my ring and I'm like, oh yeah, that's freaking dope.
I do think it's cool and all. I just don't think people should have to wear them all the time. I think that's just going way too far. Like I
Yeah, I
mean,
don't think you have to.
I've heard of many people who literally never take their wedding rings off. I just think that's creepy.
I feel like unless it was uncomfortable, I would probably be one of those people. I think,
I will definitely never be any of those people. I really don't want to wear a ring overall.
well, I think kind of going back to spirituality stuff, I don't think there's any escape we have from this world except death, which is why I think death's a beautiful thing, and which is why I think even your dark side or whatever you want to call it, I think it's a beautiful thing because you need one without the other. But anyway,
Well,
I think there's really no escape from mortality. And I think I don't know, it's kind of a
Interesting how you bring that up. I'd say in a way we're all immortal in a way. And this it's kind of hard to oh man, honestly, I'm gonna be honest here. It's a bit difficult. Like, oh, all right, let me start over. So here's the thing about death. As you know, death is really dark. Um, and but at the same time, I would say, yeah, at the same time, we do have eternal life. Um, I would
And
say there is a spirit realm, uh, which you could
to
consider to be an afterlife. Um,
to
which
cut
I'd
you off
say
real quick.
that what?
Sorry, I just wanted to say one thing.
Sure.
There are a lot of cultures where death isn't really a dark thing. It's a very celebrated thing.
Yeah,
It
for
depends
sure.
where you are.
Like
But yeah, keep going.
like Mexico, you got La Dia de los Muertos. It's a celebration of death. I think that's fascinating. Um, yeah, I mean I kind of agree with you. Like death, um, it's not inherently a bad thing. I would say that's kind of a slippery slope though, because you could say, oh hey, what if I just killed this person right now? Would that not be a bad thing? I mean, I'd be releasing them from this life. Like, I mean, and that would justify murder. So I do think that can be a slippery slope, but I do half agree with you. Death doesn't necessarily have to be a dark thing. Um, but I mean, overall, it is because I mean, it makes the people around you, just overall sad that you're gone. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, overall, it'd be like your time is up from uh, this world. Um, but at the same time, I would say it's not all bad because I would say there is such a thing as a spirit realm slash afterlife. Um, and let's see, how do I even how do I even explain this? Right now, I'm kind of looking into the idea of reincarnation. Um, but right now, at the same time, I'm kind of conflicted. I'm trying to figure out, oh, are we just gonna reincarnate, or are we just gonna be spirits just floating throughout the universe for all eternity? Um, uh, which by the way, have you ever heard of this story called the egg?
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting because we're we're basically on the same page with this. So the egg is sort of this story which kind of brings the two together. Um, and it kind of validates all religions, all beliefs, all spirituality. It really just validates everything. Um, it validates the idea of there being gods, but it also validates the idea of there not being gods. And it has to tie with just overall the concept of I guess you can call it spiritual maturity, or no, not spiritual maturity because that has more of like an elitist tone in it, but I guess you could say spiritual growth. Um,
Mhm.
so basically, the idea of it is that when you die, um, you do meet what can be considered to be God. Um, and this God would basically explain to you, um, oh yeah, uh, you are dead, and I'm God. Um, and this is the afterlife. Um, but then this God would explain to you, um, you are supposed to live every single every single lifetime, every single life on Earth in every single form, uh, whether it be an animal or a human, whether it be like a frog or a human or a bat or a pony. I don't know,
A
just
blade of grass,
a
a
blade of
tree.
grass for sure. Just all this stuff. You're supposed to experience literally everything. Um, and as you do experience everything, your soul matures. Um, well, I don't want to use the term mature, but your soul grows. And you gain experience from that past life. Um, and once you get to a certain point, once you've lived every single life on Earth, you get to a certain point um, where you've unlocked your full potential completely, and you're now ready to become a god and explore the universe, the entire universe. And and yeah, so that would basically be the idea of, well, okay, you reincarnate when you die, but at the same time, once you get to this certain point, you're able to move on and flow throughout the universe, which could be perceived, which by the way is perceived um, in Buddhism as nirvana, or in Christianity that could be heaven. It could basically be interpreted in many ways. Oh yeah, and in Mormonism, I'm gonna bring up Mormonism for a bit. In Mormonism, that would basically be um, you you becoming your own god and creating your own planet. Um, but yeah,
Like the rapture, right?
uh, no, not the rapture. The rapture would
I,
be like
that's
everyone dies all at once. Um, but in Mormonism, it's basically like uh, basically you die. And if you were a faithful Mormon, and just developed yourself throughout your life, then you can become a god. Um, and uh, and have your own planet and um, just have your own spirit children and have them become gods, and then the process continues throughout eternity. Um, but yeah, the egg kind of takes all religions, all concepts. It takes like all spirituality, and it takes the afterlife and uh, reincarnation, and kind of just combines them all into one thing. Um, but yeah, uh, I've I've been kind of thinking. I've been kind of thinking a lot lately. So when we die, what's going to happen? Are we just going to reincarnate for all eternity, or will there be a spirit realm which we can visit? I mean, not visit. I mean, will there be a spirit realm where we flow throughout the universe and basically experience everything, or will it be we reincarnate until we get to a point where we unlock this power to basically become a god and flow throughout the universe. How about you? What's your take on that?
so I think one important concept of the egg that you kind of touched on, but it feels like you're kind of missing, is the fact that it does bring a lot of religions and a lot of beliefs and essentially everything together. But one thing it kind of throws out the window is time, because when he dies in the story, he's essentially reincarnated into a rice farmer woman from way back when in the past.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot to. I did forget to mention that. Yeah, this
And
person
I
did get transported to the past.
and I think that that's very important, because I think it's not so much that you yourself are being reincarnated into all these different things, like you, Peach, are being reincarnated. I think it's more that it's it's like a revolving door, and it's all you. So I don't think you necessarily have to live all lives before you can achieve enlightenment, nirvana, heaven, I think that you already have, and I think that you are right now, because essentially, if time is thrown out the window, then that means that every life has already experienced every life because we are currently experiencing it right now. And I think that as far as
That is
like
true.
a different dimensional plane where we can like explore the universe and whatnot, I think that exists too, and that's what I would call God. I think that that exists on a different plane that we can kind of tap into, and it's
Yeah, for
really all
sure.
like that song. Oh, baby, do you know what that's worth? Oh, heaven is a place on earth.
Oh,
Say
yeah, that song.
heaven, and love comes first. We'll make heaven be a place on earth. That
I
song.
mean, thank you for your cheesy singing,
Thank you.
but yeah, that is true. Uh, heaven is actually a place on earth. I mean, like heaven. I mean, earth is heaven. Like we just need to make it into heaven, which is which is where the create your own reality thing comes into play. But yeah, uh, yeah, yeah, that is interesting for sure. Um, yeah, the egg. I'm starting to think that may be the ultimate truth, actually. Um, but right now, I'm just kind of exploring different ideas because so I actually have tapped into this. I guess what you refer to as God. Um, I wouldn't refer to it as God, but I would say I refer to it as the spirit realm. Uh,
Mhm.
basically where you feel like you are absolutely everything, and you flow throughout everything because that's what you are. You flow throughout the entire universe, and you see everything flow throughout the entire universe itself.
And I want to stop you there because you mentioned before how we can turn heaven into earth
Yeah,
and or sorry, earth into heaven. And I think you doing just that right there in the present at that very moment that you're experiencing that, I think that truly is you turning it into heaven. I think kind of like with the materialistic versus spiritual, sure you can have a revolution and you can move into the future and truly create a paradise on earth, but I think that within your own mind you can create heaven on earth at any given time as long as you're in the right mindset. And I think
yeah, that is true. It's definitely good to become in touch with this regularly, and this can be achieved definitely via meditation, or you don't even have to meditate. It's all a state of mind that you just need to figure out how to tap into.
Mhm.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, but at the same time, I think we should try to make this more um external at the same time because I do think everyone does have a right to experience this as well. Um, so I would say the best solution to this would be to spread love and peace throughout the earth. Um, so we can create this for everyone. So we can create a better place where people aren't harmed, uh, people and animals, and we're just everyone uh, just feels just just that absolute peace.
Yeah, I think that is important. And I think it's a very I think it's inevitable that we'll either kill ourselves or we'll reach that point eventually, because I think that is the natural state that
I
we're supposed to achieve eventually.
I know we'll reach that point. I don't think we're gonna kill ourselves. I know we're gonna reach that point. We are getting there, and people are starting to realize this now more than ever. people are waking up, and I know the future will be bright. Um, I know we can create, like you mentioned earlier, heaven on earth. I know we can do it. We just need to realize that we got to work together.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll get there in our lifetimes, but going back to the whole we are everything, technically we will because technically part of me will be alive to witness that firsthand.
That is true. Um, I'd say to pinpoint an exact time when that will occur, it really can happen anytime. I personally say it's right around the corner. Um, and I'd say that's up to you to interpret what around the corner means. So I'm gonna throw you a little mystery there. But I would say we're almost there, and we're actually getting to there right now. Um,
I think it's possible. I
yeah,
think it could if all of a sudden the whole world started to think a certain way, it could happen tomorrow. But I think that will be very hard to do. I think it'll have to be a grassroots movement where you end up getting non corrupt people into positions of power so that you can then take away those positions of power and you can
for sure.
balance out the playing field.
I'd say what we need to do is tap into our own power, um, and realize that the power was within all the time. I mean, all along, and we need to use this power to do good in the world, spread love, peace, joy, and help others. And then we can create our just amazing world.
A reoccurring theme to um, my self exploration has been water. I think water is very important.
I'm
It's
drinking water
essentially
right
like
now.
it's like the life essence of everything, and we're like mostly water.
It
And I think
absolutely is.
it's criminal how many people either don't have access to water or don't have access to clean water. Um,
Absolutely. We need to give the world clean water. Everyone has a right to clean water. And you are right. It is the absolute life force. Without water, life cannot exist. It's just not possible.
that's not necessarily true. We're
Well,
starting to find that life can exist without water.
oh really?
Mhm.
How so?
Sorry.
You all right?
Maybe I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm just drinking some water.
I'm gonna drink some
I
water
might be
too.
thinking of carbon. I can't remember what it was. It
Oh,
was like they found life forms that weren't carbon based
interesting.
somewhere in the Midwest. I can't fully remember, but they're like bacteria that I can't remember if they grew in water or not. But
Well,
like
I'll have to
life finds
I'll have to look I'll have to look into that because that's fascinating. But yeah, yeah, for sure. Water. I do agree with what you said earlier. Water is life, and we all deserve access to water. And I do think, in fact, I know we can create a world where everyone can have water. Um. Oh yeah. By the way, so I would like to mention so we're kind of getting like up to around the 2 hour mark. So you cool if like we just wrap this up in a bit?
yeah, I'm
All
good.
right. I'd for sure love to have you on another time though. Because yeah, like this has been overall great. And uh and yeah, there has been a lot of stuff um uh that I think we could talk about a bit more. Um
Yeah, I have a topic in mind already, but
That's
I
great.
don't.
We should definitely another time. I mean, like yeah, it's like I just don't want to make like a 3 hour podcast. Like that'd be insane. Like I've already done that before, and trust me, it's not pretty.
Yeah, I'm honestly. I feel like we've hit a lot of the points, or
Yeah,
I
yeah, we
feel
have.
like we didn't really set into this with points, but
Yeah, we didn't.
I feel like we were getting a little political, and I feel like that's not really the center of this discussion. And
Well,
I mean, there's
politics can
always
go
more
into
spiritual,
this. Um, like
right? 100%,
it's
because there's
like spirituality
go.
is about all aspects. Like spirituality can get political, it can get scientific, it can get religious, it can get all sorts of things. Like it can really sort of get into everything, really. Um, but yeah. So what? So yeah. Once again, guys, remember to spread peace and love and happiness to everyone, and make sure to help everyone. And just do good in the world. But this has been uh, talking about spirituality with Small. By the way, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Small. It's been amazing.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I had a great time, and I would like to add that let's make cat girls a reality.
Yes, let's do it. Let's make
That
a
would be
reality of cat girls. It'll be
that would be dope.
it would
Hit
be
up Elon
pretty
Musk.
dope. That'd be great. Just beautiful made cat girls everywhere.
Talk about heaven being a place on earth. Let me tell you what.
For sure. But yeah. Anyway, guys, yeah, it's been great. So yeah, that's about it. Stay tuned for the next episode. If if you guys would like to be in an episode or have an idea for an episode, then just leave a comment below. And uh, yeah, stay tuned for more episodes every single Tuesday. See you guys later. Bye.